Vanderbilt, Texas. Right now, Vandy 2.5-point dog at Texas. Anything on this one?
I have not bet this yet, but Texas money line, I think a pretty cheap money line here. You can either play it that way at minus 135, or you can go Diego Pavia under rushing yards. I know there's not a lot of college props early in the week. Those populate kind of toward Thursday, Friday, and over the weekend. But I think Diego Pavia is good. That Texas defense may be turned against him on Saturday.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Welcome in another edition of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Murray, as it is Wednesdays with Wes. Wes Reynolds will come up here in just a little bit. Some situational spots as we head into Week 10 and the latest on the Indiana Hoosiers, who are no longer listed on the make or miss the playoff board because they are such a lock to make the playoffs. So always great to check in with Wes Reynolds. And then Brett Ciancia, Pick Six Previews, Pick Six Plus, available on picksixpreviews.com. A great tool to have in the old tool belt as you handicap each and every week. So as we tend to do here on the early week episodes, a very quick open. A couple things that jumped out to me. And I wanted to look through an article that Brett McMurphy, America's Insider, wrote. And he also took a couple of quotes from Stormy and JVT from Money Moves discussing the situation that unfolded last weekend in the Utah-Colorado game. So if you weren't attuned to it, Utah announced that Devin Dampier was probable to play in the game on Saturday night against Colorado. And then, lo and behold, he did not play in the game. And this has been something that's been going on with Utah, it feels like forever. Cam Rising, whatnot. And this is the start to Brett McMurphy's column over on 3. Disingenuous, manipulative, ridiculous. Those are descriptions of college football coaches' refusal to abide by the new availability reports. And as you go a little bit further down and get some of these anonymous quotes in the column, it is pretty stunning to hear what folks are saying about the way these injury reports are being looked at. More injury deception from Utah, as McMurphy writes, but no public repercussions from the Big 12. Not even a, quote, "I really promise never to do it again" reprimand. Scott Draper, the Big 12's chief football and competition officer, declined to comment for this story. A Power Conference athletic director told Brett McMurphy over at On3, "Until there are real penalties, it won't matter. Nobody will take this seriously." And as Brett pointed out, USC was issued a, air quotes, whopping $5,000 fine when Brian Jackson, I believe, was listed as out, was eventually played in the game, and Lincoln Riley called it a unique situation. So, this is new to college football, and certainly as bettors, we want to trust in these injury reports, but as of right now, it's hard to do so when you have a situation unfold like what we saw with Utah. And look, it didn't matter. Bird Ficklin ran all over Colorado. That was an absolute dominating performance by Utah. But it will be fascinating to see how these injury reports are policed as time goes on. Another athletic director in the article told Brett McMurphy, "If you want people to follow the rules, you need to incentivize coaches not to do it. Look at what the NFL does. Until a conference threatens to take away from the revenue share cap, something that really impacts a school, it ain't gonna matter." So will we see that at some point? Who knows? But I thought an interesting column up on 3 by our guy Brett McMurphy, and a couple of quotes in there from Stormy and JVT. JVT pretty strong on Kyle Whittingham on Money Moves earlier this week. Whittingham has done it multiple times this year, our guy JVT said, and was quoted in the column. "If you're actually taking the sanctity of these availability reports that you as a conference have installed, you should take these more seriously there should be some repercussion. He's outright lying and manipulating reports. That's ridiculous. Well said, JVT. And we'll see if Devin Dampier plays this week. Big one, by the way, for Utah this week against Cincinnati, as the number has moved up on Utah out to 9.5. And I think that is going to be a great game to watch, but I do wonder if Cincinnati, and we'll talk more about this with Brett Ciancia, who is prolific offensively, struggles defensively, will they be able to have much success against that defense of Utah on Saturday night? One other thing I wanted to mention here before we get to Wes Reynolds is the Group of 5 college football playoff bid. And boy, these numbers have been all over the place, and they took a big hit last week when South Florida was around plus 125 to make the playoff and then lost to Memphis as around a 4.5, 5-point favorite. Brendan Lewis played in the game. He was great. And Memphis, who does have that ugly loss to UAB, sits at plus 450. And right now, as we look at it, and on Tuesday night, James Madison, by the way, went down to Texas State as a touchdown favorite and won convincingly. You've got Tulane, South Florida, Memphis, and North Texas, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the odds to make the playoff, but all north of 3-1. Tulane plus 320, South Florida plus $4, Memphis plus 450, North Texas 5-1. And then you've got James Madison at 6-1, Boise State at 10-1, Navy at 10-1. Let's start with Navy real quick. Navy is undefeated, so you might initially think, well, why are they only 10-1 to make the playoff? Here's the problem with the mids. They go to Denton this week to play North Texas, where they're a 6-point underdog. Then they go to South Bend, where they'll take on Notre Dame. Last year on a neutral, Navy was a 14-point underdog to Notre Dame. So now this game will be in South Bend. Notre Dame, from a power rating standpoint, is better this year than they were last year. So I think that number could be close to 3 touchdowns. Then you're hosting South Florida, where you'll be a home dog. And then you're at Memphis, where you'll be a dog. So you look at Navy, they're going to be underdog in their next 4 games. Not to say that they can't win any of those, but it seems like an uphill climb. And one of the producers here at VSiN, Danny Smith, retweeted me and said, I think 10-1 might be too short. And I agree. I think Navy probably should be longer than 10-1 to make the college football playoff with that remaining schedule, despite an undefeated start to the season for the midshipmen. But when you look at the rest of the betting market, it is pretty fascinating because it is clear, in my opinion, that the American is the best Group of 5 conference. We don't know yet what the committee thinks of this. We'll find out next week. But you look at Tulane, and they are now the favorite amongst teams in the G5 to make the playoff. They do have a loss to Ole Miss, and it was a whooping at the hands of the Rebels down there in Oxford, but Ole Miss looks to be a playoff team. They have a win over Duke. They have a win over Northwestern, both Power 5 wins, both teams that will and should make bowl games. And then you look at the Tulane schedule. They have to go to Memphis, and that's their most challenging task remaining. UTSA this weekend could be a bit of a look-ahead spot, that Thursday night game tomorrow. So will Tulane be buttoned up there? So they're a unique case. You've got South Florida now with 2 losses, but they look to be the highest power-rated team amongst the remaining teams in the American. You've got UTSA next week at Navy, at UAB, and Rice. You have to remember, you have to win your conference in order to make the playoff out of the G5 or earn the auto bid. You could, in theory, not win your conference, but be ranked high enough. North Texas, they got smashed by South Florida at home. Their schedule shapes up nicely. Navy, UAB, Rice, and Temple, but they lose out the tiebreaker with South Florida, so that's why you're seeing their number a little bit further down. Tulane is undefeated in conference play. And then I think what's the other interesting element is James Madison. So James Madison, and I'm very curious to see what the committee thinks of the Dukes. So James Madison does have a loss to Louisville. Other than that, they have looked really solid. I got a tweet from Ole Bigelow, Mangoose, and he asked about James Madison. And he said, what does JMU need to have happen to make it? seems like they're the only team out of those top 5 that doesn't control its own destiny. And I do think James Madison, right or wrong, has some work to do. They lose to Louisville. It was a competitive game. They didn't come out on top. They were up at the half, lost by 2 touchdowns. The problem is James Madison, their strength of schedule is currently, per Sagarin, 128th in the country. If you look at a team like Tulane on the flip side, it's 63rd. So the conference, the American versus the Sun Belt, it's really hard to compare those two. And what also I think hurts James Madison was their dominating performance over Old Dominion a couple of weeks ago. Took a big hit when Old Dominion, prior to going to Harrisonburg to play JMU, lost to Marshall. So per Sagarin, James Madison is ahead of North Texas, is ahead of Tulane. But I do wonder, how much does that strength of schedule hurt them? And do they need a situation like a North Texas with a couple of losses to win the conference in order for James Madison to get in? So the G5 bid is a pretty fun discussion, I think, to have. And maybe you take a shot on a JMU at 6-1 if you think carnage could unfold in the American. I don't think Boise has a real good shot, in my opinion. At 10-1, they lost to South Florida. They lost to Notre Dame, their 2 biggest games. The Mountain West is down this year, and you're kind of getting a lot off of the name brand of Boise State. So at 10-1, not necessarily something I am jumping at the opportunity to bet. We did see San Diego State, by the way, jump into the fold here. San Diego State, they only have 1 loss. They play Boise State in a couple of weeks. So that Boise State-San Diego State game could be pretty intriguing. For the Aztecs, they play Wyoming this week, and then they go to the islands to take on Hawaii. And then after that, they play Boise. So is that game against Hawaii a little bit of a look ahead for San Diego State? They do have 1 loss. It was an ugly loss to Washington State. But welcome to the party, pal. San Diego State, 22-1 to make the college football playoff. All right, just a reminder, folks, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as we continue to build up this bad boy. We're up on YouTube every episode. We've got clips as well. Apparently, folks, pretty excited, and I say that very sarcastically, about Adam's take on Vanderbilt, whether or not the luck will run out. Good pull by Wyatt Tomchek, our producer, on that clip that we put up on YouTube. So check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/college football betting podcast, and make sure you hit that subscribe button there. As you know, 3 episodes each and every week here on the podcast. Just a reminder, too, we've had some great partners all season long, including our friends over at Rainbow Authentics. That's why I'm donning this hat. You can get this hat over at rainbowauthentics.com. They are the official source of game use apparel, autographs, and trading cards for your favorite Hawaii student athlete. Every item tells a story, whether it's a game-worn jersey, a signed ball, or unique collectibles. You'll be capturing the moment and owning a piece of Hawaii sports history. Just a reminder, we talked about it on Monday's podcast. The Tokyo Toe collection will be coming out shortly on Rainbow Authentics, so make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that. One of the best stories in college football this year, and very well could be up for the Lou Groza Award for the nation's best kicker. So check them out, rainbowauthentics.com, to check out all they have to offer. Mahalo to our friends over at Rainbow Authentics. They have been a proud sponsor of VSiN's college football betting podcast all year long. All right, quick break. When we come back, Wednesdays with Wes. Wes Reynolds will break down his favorite plays for Week 10 of the college football season. And as promised, Wes Reynolds, of course, VSiN's own. You can read his great work as part of the VSiN College Basketball Betting Guide as the basketball season starts on Monday, believe it or not. And I will be headed to the football school that is Indiana in a couple of weeks. I believe 2 weeks from today, I will be at Assembly Hall. Looking forward to that, and who knows what that crummy basketball program is going to do. It's a football school nowadays, right, Wes?
It is, and there are T-shirts to prove it being sold there in Bloomington that it says football school. But, we'll see how the Hoosiers and Darian DeVries do. A nice little exhibition win over Baylor on Sunday. But, yeah, I'm following – It adds to almost the complications, Tim, when we're handicapping college basketball, because now we got to look at all these exhibition games, and it's not just like, Indiana when they would play athletes in action a few years ago, or they would play like an international.
The Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah, some international team. Now it's like these are real exhibition games because there are organizers that found that there was money to be made with these things. So, that's why Indiana Baylor exhibition tickets on Sunday afternoon on a Colts football Sunday are going for like $140. And a lot of my brethren were complaining about that.
Yeah, it was funny. I was actually talked about this with Adam on Monday. A buddy of mine is the PA announcer for the Bucks, and he was put to duty on Friday night as Oklahoma and Wisconsin played to I think 84-83 exhibition game. So yeah, it's been fun to see some of these exhibitions. You don't want to overreact too much to them, but I had to laugh, and I was trying to get some quotes from back in the day because Lou Holtz used to talk up the opposition that Notre Dame would play in the early 90s, especially Navy, as they were, the next coming of a juggernaut. And Curt Cignetti, he's got a lot of Saban in him. He obviously coached on Saban's staff. He's got the all right, he's got the pauses down, but he's got a little Lou Holtz in him. I'm going to read some quotes, and you tell me who Curt Cignetti is talking about. Good football team. Coach Loxley and his staff have done a great job recruiting the DMV. Excellent young talent. A lot of it is showing up on the field, especially on defense, as true freshmen. They got off to a 4-0 start. They had a 20-0 lead over Washington with 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter for win 5 and went into the fourth 20-3. And it kind of came apart on them and lost by 4. They lost in Nebraska by 3, who's a 6-2 football team, as is Washington. They're open this week, but we're really impressed with this football team. I mean, they're in the top 10 in the country in turnover ratio. They've got a new defensive coordinator who's been in the NFL for 16 years, was a linebacker coach for the Ravens, 2 Super Bowls there. They had 14 interceptions, 22 sacks. They're giving up 17 points a game. Their offense is only giving up 2 sacks, and they're outscoring people in the first 3 quarters 175-50. Excellent punter. Excellent field goal kicker, short snapper, long snapper, and they're doing a lot of good things. A freshman quarterback, 6'5", 230 pounds, really has a strong arm and can run. Is he talking about Ohio State? Like, what playoff team is Curt Cignetti talking about, Wes?
He is not telling any lies with the factoids there that you gave, Tim, but he is very much playing Lou Holtz because Lou Holtz would always do that. Well, they got the best punt coverage team in the country. He would think of something that maybe, and this could be like an 0-8 team that Notre Dame was laying like 42 or something. They got the best punt return unit in the country, and that's what Curt Cignetti is doing with Maryland. He did it a little bit with UCLA last week where it's like, hey, they're a 3-0 ball club. Ever since the coaching change, and that's fact, they're a 3-0 ball club, and they were running the ball a lot better, and they were playing better. And then it was 56-6 on Saturday against UCLA. Now going to Maryland, like this was a game on the schedule that I thought when we were talking about these teams going into the season, Tim, I was like, this is probably the trap game for Indiana, because then they got Penn State, thinking what we were thinking about Penn State going into the season, that they were going to be right in the thick of the national title picture and up there in the playoff rankings, and now, under 500. So it's like this was the trap game. I did not think they were going to be 22-point favorites on the road at Maryland. And this Maryland team, by the way, they did start out 4-0 and, still need another to get over that win total at 4.5. But they've kind of had Maryland a little bit of rotten luck. Maybe you could call it coming back to earth a little bit, but they had a couple games they should have won. They should have probably beaten UW. They probably should have beaten Washington. They lose by 3 at home to Nebraska. I felt that they were going to get one of those games. They lose both by 1 score, and then they go to UCLA, coin flip game, and they don't win. Lose 20-17. So now they're off a bye. I will say in this spot, I have not bet this game yet. I'm not going to lay it with Indiana here. I did last week against UCLA because I just thought Indiana was lying in wait here. Yeah. UCLA was kind of getting talked up like, hey, they've turned their season around. And Indiana was a little sloppy, at least in the first half on homecoming against Michigan State. So I thought, okay, Curt Cignetti, big noon kickoff in town. They're going to want to prove a point. And they're going to want to beat the hell out of somebody. And UCLA was just that team that was on the schedule in that scenario. But now going on the road, laying 22 to Maryland, the freshman quarterback, Malik Washington, I think has been very solid. I think that this is probably too much. It would be Maryland or pass for me, and I'll likely have at least a small piece of Maryland. I don't think that this line is really going to do much movement, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be right around that number on Saturday come kickoff.
Yeah, the look-ahead line was 17.5, so you've seen an adjustment because of Indiana's performance over UCLA, and you're right. I mean, it did feel like, and I know a couple of folks in the Circa Friday Football Invitational laid the chalk with Indiana, and that it did feel like a primo spot. It's funny. I think back to the preseason, Wes, and we talked about situational spots and how they've kind of come about. And I looked at Maryland off a bye hosting Indiana with Penn State on deck, and I thought, man, this is a terrible spot for Indiana. Well, now Penn State, as we know, not as good as we had anticipated, which leads us into Penn State, Ohio State. And I was looking back at the Game of the Year lines at South Point, and Chris Andrews put these up, I want to say mid-August. And I always like to look back and to see, how things have changed. And Ohio State was a 3.5-point home favorite in the preseason. That would be a nice ticket to have, as they are now 20.5-point favorites at home against Penn State. So, look, we know how bad this season has been for the Nittany Lions. They did get a cover in their first game post James Franklin. What do you expect in this one with Ohio State laying almost 3 touchdowns against the Nittany Lions this weekend?
This, by the way, is the biggest spread with these two teams in 20 years, since 2005. Ohio State's been a bully. Look, they can cover big numbers. Never think that they can't, because they find ways. But Tim, I haven't bet this yet. I'm waiting to see if there's any movement on it. But I kind of might be thinking I'm going to be on the Penn State side. As ridiculous as it sounds, because they're 3-4 now. Now they're just trying to get bowl eligible, and that's not a certainty here, because you play Ohio State and then you have Indiana coming in next week. You go to Michigan State. You have Nebraska coming in and at Rutgers. So you've got to kind of handicap the mentality, I think, of Penn State. I think they should have beaten Iowa in the first game after Franklin, and they end up losing by 1. Did cover the +3, +3.5 that it closed. But I think if there's one game where Penn State, you could say, okay, they're not going to quit on the season, that they're going to give an effort, I think it's here at Ohio State. I think they may treat this like a bowl game, because there are some guys on that roster, I think, and some really good players that are going to play in the National Football League and be drafted next April, that are going to have some pride here. And they've been close losses over the years. And you just look talent for talent. The gap is not all that wide between the two teams, because Penn State has been recruiting guys. They just haven't gotten it done. And, right. They make the coaching change, so maybe that's part of it. But I think that this is a big number for Ohio State to lay. Can they cover it? Certainly they can, and they cover most of these big numbers. But I think Penn State may have something here. I think that this may be a little bit of a surprise. It's the big noon, by the way, on Saturday. So I feel like the atmosphere is a little bit different at night than it is early. Certainly the horseshoe will be filled, but I think I don't know if they catch Ohio State necessarily sleeping. I just think that this is a low-scoring game, 43.5, by the way, the total, because we're seeing that with Ohio State. They're not putting up 50 points like they have in years past. The offense, maybe, even though they have Jeremiah Smith, it's not as explosive. The running game, I think, is a little bit down, even though they got 2 quality backs. They got a young quarterback who they're still developing. And then you always have to put Ohio State into context. And we talked about this a little bit on last week's show. Julian Sayin has done nothing wrong. He's been terrific for a redshirt freshman. But he's throwing against throwing to the best receivers in the solar system. We went over that last week. When you've just got those receivers, it's like, how good is that quarterback really? So low total 43.5, getting almost 3 touchdowns. Give me the Nittany Lions reluctantly, because I've done that before against Ohio State. And then all of a sudden they win like 38-7.
Yeah, I'm debating maybe come tomorrow, Thursday, on the pod with humans. I could split a unit here, maybe take a little under, a little Penn State as well. We'll see if we get 21. Ohio State, worth noting, Wes, the only team to not fail to cover this year. They're 6-0-1 ATS on the closing number this year, so they have been great against the spread.
First half, by the way, is like 11.5. I think there's some 10.5 out there as well. That could be an angle that maybe they got enough to hang for 30 minutes, but not 60. So that could be another way I'll play this.
Yeah, that could all. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, I know it's apples and oranges, but you think back to Monday Night Football. Washington goes into the locker room tied with Kansas City as a 10.5-point underdog, and then everything falls apart in the second half. So certainly that could be an angle, as you alluded to. I think FanDuel 11.5, DraftKings sits at 10.5. So certainly a potential look there for a first half angle on Penn State and Ohio State. What's ironic is the game of the year line for the cocktail party was 8.5 in favor of Georgia. Florida has fired their head coach. Georgia's top 10 in the country, and the number right now sits at 7. So it's pretty fascinating to see, with everything that's gone wrong for Florida, this number still sits at 7. FanDuel does have a 7.5. I think BetMGM has a 7.5 as well if you're looking to bet the dog here. We talked extensively last week, Wes, on the podcast about the fired coach bump, and it was perfect timing for me to bet Colorado State as they got shut out by Wyoming 28-0. So the fired coach bump is now 6-2 ATS in the first game post-firing. Similarly to Penn State, there's a lot of talent on this Florida roster, and this is a rivalry game, neutral site, coming off a bye week. What do you make of this spot? Do you think the Gators are competitive here in the cocktail party in Jacksonville?
I do, and I did take a 7.5. And speaking of Colorado State, that is where Billy Gonzalez played his college football. Billy Gonzalez, now the interim head coach for the University of Florida. He's the wide receiver coach. I believe this is his third stint with the Gators, because he was there when Urban was there, of course, when Tebow and they were winning championships and all that. He was also there in the Dan Mullen era in the late 2010s, early 2020s. Now he is back on the Billy Napier staff. So this guy's kind of like Gator through and through, a little bit like Frank Wilson, I think, is going to be with LSU after Brian Kelly was let go on Sunday. I think that this is different. A lot of the Florida players, sometimes when a coach gets let go, it's kind of like, oh, we're glad he got let go. I don't think they were necessarily happy with Billy Napier being let go. Maybe a lot of the LSU guys, I think, were like okay with Coach Kelly being let go, but not necessarily at Florida. And, that could work two ways, right? It could be like, okay, a team's going to quit on the season, kind of mail it in, focus on where they're transferring, like you're seeing a little bit with LSU right now. Or are they going to say, you know what, let's salvage something here. Let's finish strong. And for Coach Gonzalez, who, let's be honest, isn't going to get that job at Florida. But the players still want to play for him, and still like him and still respect him. And also the fact that you're getting a rival here. This isn't like Florida playing, one of the SEC schools that aren't necessarily a big rival. This is Georgia. And this is the cocktail party in Jacksonville and Duval. So they're going to play hard, I think, here. And with Georgia's still very good. They're always going to be good, especially if Kirby's smart as head coach, and they're always going to get talent. But they're not really peak Georgia if you've watched this team last year. I know they pulled it out for me a couple weeks ago against Ole Miss with the cover when that looked like it was very much in jeopardy. But I think this is young talent, Tim. This is not like a roster laden with seniors that have been in the program for a few years. And I think on the offensive and defensive line, they're still very good and talented, but they're not as dominant. I'm trying to explain it, in that way, and people might think that's absurd. But if you really watch them, they're not as dominant at the line of scrimmage as they have been in years past. And they give up points. Look, they gave up plenty to Ole Miss. They gave up plenty to Tennessee. I'm not saying Florida is in that class in terms of dynamism on offense, but I felt 7 in the hook here, and even 7. It was a little big here for a Florida team that I don't think is necessarily going to pack it in, and they're certainly not going to pack it in this weekend.
Well, in Florida, look, strong defense this year. You look at some of the numbers, and I'm looking at Brett Ciancia's breakdown of Pick 6 Plus, and you'll hear from Brett here in just a little bit. To your point, you look at Georgia and some of the numbers, opponent-adjusted offense per play, 35th out of 68 Power 4 teams. So, nothing crazy. Defense, good, not great, 20th overall out of 68 Power 4 teams. So I have not bet this game yet, but certainly I was looking more at the dog in this one. Vanderbilt and Texas, this game is so intriguing to me. You've got the Arch Manning situation. He is in concussion protocol. Will he play? Will it be Matthew Caldwell, who stepped in overtime, Wes? Matthew Caldwell, journeyman, Jacksonville State to Gardner-Webb to Troy, and now at Texas, and an older guy, obviously more of a veteran quarterback. And then you've got Vanderbilt. They've got Van Wilder at quarterback and Diego Pavia, back-to-back big wins, LSU and Missouri, both at home. The Missouri game was a true rock fight. I have kind of played mind games here on this game, because if you do the simple math, Oklahoma, Texas went off, 3 in favor of Texas on a neutral, and now in Austin, this number is under 3. So it feels like there may be line value on Texas, but Texas has played back-to-back overtime games. Vanderbilt's played back-to-back wins over big-time opponents at home. I kind of lean towards Texas. We talked about this on Monday's pod. I'm curious your angle on Vanderbilt, Texas on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm the same way here. And I think you've heard a lot of the sentiment because of Vanderbilt getting those 2 big wins and having College game day there in Nashville and winning in the spotlight against a good team, against a Missouri team that I think is pretty good, and winning it with defense. And now the Diego Pavia for Heisman campaign and backers are being very vociferous, and he's wearing the what is it, Turnt? Is that what was on his lid last week at the press conference? Turnt. Well, Fernando Mendoza is talking about like stocks and mutual funds and business and all that stuff, and Diego Pavia Turnt. But so it's just a conflict of personalities, which is kind of fun. These different personalities. But I'm trying to think of a way that I was going to play this as well, because I lean your side on Texas as well, because it's like, well, because the perception is that Texas sucks, right?
Right.
Is that Texas is bad and Vanderbilt
should have lost to Mississippi State.
Yes.
Yep.
I was very lucky to push that game, by the way, at 7. So on the bye, but yeah, like the perception is that Texas is no good, and the rumors that Sark was, considering he'd be interested in the Titans job. Apparently, Diana Rossini, who reported that, apparently has walked that back. But I don't know if that's Jimmy Sexton doing Jimmy Sexton things, by the way. He's known to do that, the super agent. And then he's like, no, that's not true at all, even though he somehow puts that out there. But we digress. I think Texas being favored, I think you're going to have a lot of the general public are going to gravitate to Vanderbilt, because they're the hot story and they're the hot team, and Texas is in fact not back, and they have looked very, very ordinary and pedestrian and not looked like the preseason number 1 team in the country. So I'm thinking, do I want to play it that way, or do I want to maybe play Texas another way, where I go like under on Diego Pavia, perhaps on his rushing yards, which I think is maybe down to like 47.5, 48.5. But Texas is pretty damn good against the run. Like Ohio State couldn't run on them. They've been, I think, pretty solid in terms of stopping the run. And you could see by this total, by the way, at 45, even as low as 44.5 in some places, that this is going to be a low-scoring game. And I don't think it's necessarily because Arch is in concussion protocol, because Texas's offense has been pretty uneven, even with Arch Manning starting. So I kind of think the Longhorns are the right side here, that maybe this is like, okay, we're being questioned, our guts and our heart is being questioned, and we haven't been what we thought we were going to be. But they just have that one game where they're like, hey, we're still Texas and we still matter. And maybe this is the game on Saturday.
Yeah, and that kind of felt like it was the Red River spot, right? Where it seemed like everybody in the world, even though John Mateer had a broken thumb, hey, this team stinks, Texas is no good. And then lo and behold, Texas is able to kind of suffocate that spot there. So yeah, I have not bet Texas yet. It was a little bit lower earlier this week. Keep an eye on the injury report. Obviously, Arch Manning, but Michael Taffy, the stud safety, I believe he had a procedure on his thumb. So I don't know if he's going to be available or not. So certainly something to keep an eye on there. But look, you look at some of the numbers. Offensively, Vanderbilt very good, and I mentioned them already. Brett's numbers: Vanderbilt third in opponent-adjusted offense per play, but then you got a loaded defense. So it's kind of strength on strength in that in this particular game. So should be a fun one, and we'll see if Vanderbilt can continue to keep it rolling. A couple other situational spots, and I talked about a bunch of these on primetime on Tuesday night, and you and I kind of handicapped similarly, Wes, where we look at some ugly dogs and some letdown spots, and a spot that you and I both really liked last week, and we discussed it on the podcast, and it felt like there was a chance it was going to be an excruciating loss because Wake Forest kept fumbling the ball at their own 5-yard line, but somehow they kick a field goal with no time remaining from 50 yards out. Now Wake Forest, after the big win over SMU, goes on the road to Florida State, and Florida State off a bye week. A lot of chatter about Mike Norvell being fired. The last time we saw them, Wes, they were losing at Stanford. So this is a ugly favorite in this spot here. Florida State laying 9.5. And my guess is that you're looking at the Noles here and maybe a little bit of a buy low desperation spot. Florida State 0-4 in the ACC, but laying almost double digits against a pretty good Wake Forest squad.
Yeah, I am on the Noles here. And look, that spot has not worked out for the Noles when it's like, okay, this is where you think is the slam spot, and then they somehow disappoint. And, all of a sudden this team was 3-0, and it's like, man, this team's a playoff contender. Like, the Noles are back. And then they lose the Field Storm game against Virginia, lose to the U, get upset at home by Pitt, lose at Stanford, and now it's all gone sideways. But for Florida State, I guess some good news here. Tommy Castellanos looks like he is going to be clear to go. Took that shot that took him out of the Stanford game very late. Of course, Florida State off the bye, so it looks like he is going to go. And I think that Florida State may be good to go. This is like on the brink here. Like, you don't want to not make a bowl game. And
right.
You've still got some coin flippy games down the stretch. You got Clemson at NC State, at Florida, and that rivalry game. So, I would think that this is going to be the best effort that you would get out of Florida State. Meanwhile, the Deacs, one game away from being bowl eligible. I was on the Deacs last week. I think you were as well. We talked about it on the show. That was an ugly win, man. 13-12. That was one of the ugliest games that you will see. Turnovers all over the place by both teams. Neither of the Wake Forest quarterbacks could really throw the ball. I mentioned Deshaun Purdue. He threw it a little bit better, but he threw 2 picks. Robbie Ashford, both quarterbacks, by the way, played last week, and I think maybe you'll see that here a little bit. Ashford, the better runner. Purdue, the better thrower. The Charlotte transfer. But man, they really struggled to run to move the ball. I felt, even though they were better than SMU, they had 5 turnovers last week, Wake Forest, and somehow won outright at home as a dog, which hardly ever happens. I don't care what the scenario is. Yeah, I'm gonna lay the Noles here. Starting to see a couple 10s pop because I think that got put out today that Castellanos is officially a go.
Yeah, this was on the short list for me. It's you don't say it often, an ugly favorite, laying a big number here, but sometimes as our friend Chris Felica likes to say, a dog with fleas. I don't know if Wake Forest will be a dog with fleas. They might. I think Vanderbilt probably more so, but yeah, we'll see.
Those are my favorite type of favorites, though. That's like, oh my God. Like when the general public's like, okay, hammer time on the dog. Those are not the dogs you want to be on. You want to be on the uglier dogs. You don't want to be on the cute, cuddly little ones,
Yeah, and I know, it didn't play out perfectly because the closing number was 10.5, but it was kind of reminiscent to Notre Dame and USC, right? It was 9.5, 10. Every spot that I did that week, Wes, was, man, this number's way too big. And Notre Dame wins the game by 10. They missed an extra point, which would have made it 11. But yeah, you always want to be a little weary of, a spot like that. And when Florida State's 0-4 in the ACC, Wake Forest coming off a win over SMU, and the number's 9.5 and shifting the other way, sometimes it is a bit of a tell. So I might be talking myself into Florida State here as an ugly favorite. All right, let's get to a couple ugly dogs. And this one will make you grow a little bit of hair on your chest. Last week, I did have Houston catching the full touchdown in Arizona State. I think both you and I were on the Cougs there. And now you get a role reversal, right? You win this big game against Arizona State, and now you come back home, and you're almost a 2-touchdown favorite against, let's call it what it is, a pretty bad football team in West Virginia. So this is not a cuddly dog. This is an ugly dog. This is a big old Rottweiler that's kind of drooling, and you're wondering what the heck's going on there. But what do you make of this spot? I have not bet West Virginia yet, but West Virginia definitely on the short list. I was hoping to see if the number would get back to 14. I think there were 14s out there earlier in the week. Those were quickly gobbled up. So maybe we get back to 14, but what do you make of West Virginia at Houston?
Yeah, a couple of them remain out there. One here on the Strip in Las Vegas at the Wynn, and one at Bet Rivers, but basically all gone at 13.5. I did catch a little 14 earlier in the week, and I'm almost like going against myself, Tim, because on Saturday night after watching some of the Houston, Arizona State, and we were both on Houston, I was like, man, Willie Fritz has done a hell of a job with very little fanfare, being 7-1 and being right in the mix. I think in the Big 12 title picture, even though they do have that one loss where Texas Tech really at full strength got them with Beer and Morton at quarterback. I think it was 35-11 final score. But Houston's done a really nice job this year, and I've played them a couple times, and now they finally got a little respect on their name. They got ranked this week for the first time. And when that happens with the team, more often than not every single time exclusively, but more often than not, I will go against that team because all of a sudden they're getting a little respect. And then there is also the emotional, and I hate to, not necessarily using this as a handicapping angle, but there is that emotion. If you watched College Game Day earlier in the year, and you should be watching Tim's show, by the way, on VSiN Saturday mornings, but there was the profile of the strength coach at Houston who was battling cancer. I think Jen Latta did the story, and he sadly passed away over the last week. So there's a lot of emotion, I think, with Houston right now. And I think that could work against them. And you got a West Virginia team coming in, disappointing season. Rich Rod knows this is going to be a rebuild. McAfee talked about the NIL issues they have there on College Game Day, the former Mountaineer, and that he put a little in the collection plate to try to help him out to get some players. West Virginia was competitive against TCU last week. They lost by 6, but it was a pretty even game in the stats. They never were a threat to win, but they got the kid Fox, who's a little bit of a passer, because they were going with Wilkins. I remember in the BYU game they backdoored. It was actually Scotty Fox that backdoored it for West Virginia. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. So they're still competing, and I just think lower total, 49.5, getting about 2 touchdowns. This could be a little bit of a get-through-it game where maybe Houston's starting to deal with these new expectations, then plus the emotion of the lost coach. I think that's a big task for Houston, a bigger task than meets the eye.
Yeah, so 13.5 right there, mostly in the market, as you alluded to. A couple of shops do still have the 14. Wouldn't be surprised if we see another 14 show up here as we get closer to game day. All right, last game I wanted to hit on. Ole Miss, I got to give them credit. That was a really impressive win to go on the road to Oklahoma. I think I had Oklahoma in a money line parlay, so I was on the wrong side of that, obviously, as they did not win the game, Oklahoma, even though, according to Brent Venables, they were the better team. So that is worth noting that they were the better team, and Lane Kiffin took exception to that in his press conference earlier this week. But Ole Miss is in great shape right now to make the college football playoff. Last year, that clunker that they had against Kentucky really kept them out, and now it kind of feels like, could this be that clunker spot for Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss, after back-to-back big games here, they lose to Georgia, they beat Oklahoma, they come home. It's a night game, so that's good. There's a lot of rumors about where Lane Kiffin's going to end up next year. Is he going to stay at Ole Miss? Is he going to go to Florida? Is he going to go to LSU? And then you got South Carolina. And my worry, obviously, Wes, with this game is, did their guts get ripped out last week, leading by 8 in the fourth quarter against Alabama, letting that game slip away, losing 29-22. That was a spot that you and I discussed quite a bit here on the podcast, with South Carolina catching double digits. So does South Carolina have it in them again to cover a double-digit spread in what could be maybe a little bit of a sleepy spot here for Ole Miss off of back-to-back big road games?
Well, I bet them plus 13, just getting that number, and there's 12.5 mostly out there right now. It would not surprise me to see get back to 13 with Ole Miss and how impressive they were against Oklahoma. But 2 weeks in a row, Ole Miss have had these like high leverage games. They lose one at Georgia and then they win one at Oklahoma. Now you come home and it's just, are they lacking a little bit of energy and a little bit of oomph, especially early in the game? Because like you said, Tim, it's all set up. South Carolina, Citadel, Florida, bye week, and then the Egg Bowl on Friday, which should be on Thanksgiving night, but the NFL's got to control every damn night of the calendar. Unfortunately, I missed the Egg Bowl on Thursday night after that Cowboys game in the afternoon. But they play at Mississippi State to close the season. Lane Kiffin against his old assistant Jeff Lebby. It's all set up for Ole Miss. Like, they're going to be in the playoff, even if they're not impressive in these 4 games. They're a lock almost for the playoff. And I hate to use that L word. And once you start to use that, that's when maybe something happens here. This is college football after all. So I think that this is a big number. I thought South Carolina, and I'm not saying they are the better team than Alabama, but I thought in that game last week, for the most part, they were. I really do. I just think that bad penalties, bad turnovers, I felt Alabama was fortunate, even though I think Alabama would beat them like 9 times, probably 8 or 9 times out of 10. I felt Alabama was really fortunate. And South Carolina, to me, lost season. Now, what you worry about with them, too, is if Shane Beamer is going to go back and take his daddy's old job at Virginia Tech, is that a distraction? But some wise guys do like South Carolina this week. And, what is that? Someone knows something. I'm going with the someones. And that's what I did here with the Gamecocks.
All right. We have a loyal listener who loves this segment, but has always asked, hey, can we get a sum it up, kind of put it all together wrap up here with Wes? So Stacy Nolan, this is for you. Let's wrap it up nice and neat. So Indiana, Maryland, pass, or would you look at the dog?
Lean to Maryland. I'll probably have a little bit of Terps on Saturday and give our buddy Aaron Oster a little bit of encouragement on his Maryland Terrapin. See Aaron down at Circa.
The Drink Responsibly Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida, Georgia. You're looking at the Gators.
Yes, absolutely. I think they rally for Billy Gonzalez here.
Vanderbilt, Texas. Right now, Vandy, 2.5-point dog at Texas. Anything on this one?
Likely will be on, I have not bet this yet, but Texas money line. I think a pretty cheap money line here. You can either play it that way at minus 135, or you can go Diego Pavia under rushing yards. I know there's not a lot of college props early in the week. Those populate kind of toward Thursday, Friday, and over the weekend, but I think Diego Pavia is good. That Texas defense may be turned against him on Saturday.
Penn State, Ohio State. This is an ugly one. You're looking at the ugly dog here off a bye.
Thanks, our buddy Chuck Esposito, for putting some 21 out there if you want to take the full 3 touchdowns on Penn State. Thanks, as I lose 38-0 usually going against Ohio State. But I think the Nittany Lions are going to play hard here. I don't think that they're mailing this one in here, at least at this standpoint.
At least you get the best of the number, right?
Yes.
That's the goal in life. West Virginia, Houston. Right now, Houston 13.5 or 14-point favorite against Almost Heaven.
Almost Heaven, West Virginia. Country Roads, take me to the pay window. West Virginia plus 13.5.
South Carolina at Ole Miss, 12.5's out there right now.
Yeah, we're going with cocky here, plus 12.5. There are a couple 13s, but I think this is just one of those games for Ole Miss, and we saw it earlier this year against Washington State where they were massive favorites and barely got out alive, 24-21, and sometimes that can happen with Ole Miss. Off 2 huge road games, coming home to the Grove, it's not going to be as easy as meets the eye.
Lastly, an ugly fave. Doak Campbell, nighttime, 0-4 in the ACC, but 9.5-point favorites against Wake Forest.
Yeah, laying it with the Seminoles here. Tommy Castellanos looks like he is going to go officially for Florida State. So give me the Seminoles to get back to 500 and maybe keep the people off Mike Norvell's back down in Tallahassee for at least 1 week.
All right, check them out on VSiN. Check out the college basketball betting guide and also vsin.com/picks. Wes, always appreciate it, and we'll chat with you next Wednesday.
Tim, thank you, sir. Go Hoosiers.
There he is, Wes Reynolds, our resident Hoosier. We'll take a quick break and bring in Brett Ciancia of Pick 6 Previews on the other side. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. And we're back here on the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast from Wes Reynolds to Brett Ciancia. Those of you watching with us on YouTube, he's got that lovely fall foliage backdrop there in the Keystone State of Pennsylvania. And who would have thought it? The team that Pennsylvanians are most excited about is probably Pittsburgh, not Penn State here in late October. A whole lot to get to, Brett, with you. Looking forward to it. But I always like looking at the game grader and checking out some of the notable top performances from last week. And the undoing for Brian Kelly was a loss to Texas A&M. What did your game grader spit out for the Aggies, and how did that number compare to some of the performances we've seen this year from Power 4 teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. And that was not just a statement win for Texas A&M, but it was a knockout punch for Brian Kelly. I mean, that ended his tenure midway through the 4th season. I think for LSU coming in, it was an all-in season. They had the number 1 highest paid coordinator in college football history, Blake Baker, the number 1 transfer haul in America. We know how expensive that is. So it was really a playoff or bust season. And to be 5-3 sitting here, another embarrassing performance for LSU. But on the flip side for A&M, I think that proved that they are national title contenders. Marcel Reed is rounding into form as a Heisman contender, 4 touchdowns from him, a dual threat guy, and great receivers. But in terms of game grader, that was my number 1 game grade of the entire week. And if you're looking season-wide, that's a top 10 game grade for the whole season. So A&M is flexing, and they're rounding into form as a national title contender.
Yeah, really strong second half, trailing at the half for a second straight year, and then a dominant second half again for the Aggies against LSU. Other performances of the week that were notable: Utah's undressing of Colorado, similarly Indiana and UCLA. You on your front page of the Pick 6 Plus, you have your game grades for the entire year, and it does feel like Ohio State and Indiana, and you aren't exclusive in this. It feels like some power ratings that are out there have Indiana creeping up. Some folks might have them up there at number 2. How do your game graders so far for this whole year kind of break down when you look at like a top 5?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. There's really 2 superpower teams right now. If you're looking on the stat sheet, if you're looking for undefeated champs right now, conference champ contenders, that's Ohio State and Indiana. Ohio State has done it at a slower pace. I mean, they're very methodical with the ball this year, but on a per-play basis, very efficient, very dominant. Number 1 defense in the country, definitely, with Matt Patricia there. Indiana, I can't find a flaw with them. They look solid on both sides of the ball. You watch them play, they just play clean, they play smart, they don't make mistakes. Fernando Mendoza right now leading the Heisman poll in some spots, and rightfully so. He's just playing mistake-free, putting up a ton of points. So that's my top 2. From there is where you see the separation from a resume versus a power rating, because Notre Dame comes in at number 3 in my game grader. Now, they wouldn't be number 3 in any kind of poll, I do have them now in my playoff projection. I think they're going to finish 10-2. I think that USC win is going to continue to grow in value. So I do have them as a playoff team. But yeah, Notre Dame 3. If you stop watching them in September, they have been dominating everything in their path. That's going to continue this week. We'll talk about it later in the show. With my alma mater going up against Notre Dame, it's not going to go well. Number 4 and number 5, we'll go to the state of Texas. I've got A&M number 4, and I've got Texas Tech still number 5. I didn't want to overreact and overcorrect for that loss against Arizona State. I still think they're one of the most dominant teams in the country. So that's the top 5. I'll give you number 6, Miami. That's where I have a top 6 right now.
Well, I'm glad you wrapped up with Miami and the ACC because, there's a situation brewing in the ACC where Miami, because of that loss to Louisville, could be on the outside looking in of the ACC championship game, which might not be the worst case scenario for the ACC, Brett, because Miami at 11-1 with a win over Notre Dame, with a win over South Florida, they're going to be in the college football playoff. I think there's no doubt. And that would open the door for other ACC teams. And I don't want to say I ranted, but I certainly think that Virginia is really lucking into a bunch of wins. You look at, post-game win expectancy, inside the box score. So I remember doing the preseason show with you, and you were very low on Illinois despite the preseason hype amongst, mainstream media. And you have been proven accurate on that as Illinois has struggled. Where do you have Virginia right now amongst the Power 4 teams? Because I think this team, I give them credit. Tony Elliott, turns things around. But this team at 7-1 has a lot of flaws. And I think a couple losses are waiting for them as the season goes on.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's actually a great comparison, the Illinois of 2024, because you look back at that Illinois team, it was really well coached. You don't want to take away from the coaching, but a lot of close results, a lot of results that were 1 point or 1 score or overtime. Virginia is that team this year. Again, you give them credit that they're winning them, but a close one with Florida State that went to overtime. They beat Louisville by 3, Washington State by 2. And then last week, the goal line stand for the game-winning 2-point conversion attempt by UNC, literally inches away at the pylon from a loss. So, they're grinding out W's. You can't fault them for that. But statistically, they don't match up at all. So I've got them 50th overall in offense, 50th overall in defense. That's out of 68 Power 4. So well below average on both sides of the ball. And then in the overall number, the game grader, I've got them 40th. So, this is nowhere near where they're ranked in the AP. I think they're like 15th. And again, great story, great resume with the wins, but looking forward, I don't see it. So I think they're going to take some losses. I think you look at Georgia Tech and Louisville as your teams that could crash the party in Charlotte. I've got Georgia Tech favored in their remaining ACC games, NC State and BC by double digits, and then Pittsburgh, a toss-up game. With Louisville, same deal, favored all the way out. They've got 4 ACC games left. I got them as a touchdown favorite in all of them. So that's where we're at. I think you might see a Georgia Tech-Louisville ACC title game, ensuring that the ACC gets 2 bids. It could be a bid steal.
Yeah, and that's why we've seen the betting market on how many teams from each conference will make the college football playoff sit at minus 175 to the over. If Miami were to make the conference championship game, that's where I think you look at a 1-bid league there for the ACC. So, look, if you're going to bet the under 1.5, I would bet Miami to win the conference. I think that's very correlated, and that price is certainly juicier than the under 1.5. So a lot still to play out. But, yeah, Virginia, a team that I'm just kind of scratching my head about. Not to that same level, but I am curious, and you do a lot of work in Salt Lake, I know, so you've probably kept a very close eye on BYU. And look, I give them credit. Last week I was on Iowa State, thought it was a great spot for the Cyclones. They're up 17-7. They throw a big pick, and that kind of turned the game around, and BYU gets a pick 6 late. They deserve to win. I know post-game win expectancy was less than 50%, but this is a BYU team similar to Virginia, and like I said, not to the same level, but it does feel like maybe the ranking right now doesn't match the rating.
I mean, I'm a little bit more bullish on BYU. I think that their win over Utah really is a strong resume boost. Sure. I know that in the AP that doesn't show that, but Utah is a top 10 team in my game grader. I think they're a really strong team. So to go in there, win that game, it was a rivalry game. Bear Bachmeier is really playing well at quarterback for a true freshman, carrying the load of this team. So yeah, I mean, it's a similar diagnosis to Virginia in the fact that they have a lot of one-score wins. They beat Colorado by 3, Arizona by a score, Utah we talked about, and then this Iowa State game is a little misleading with the score. I mean, they did have that pick 6. You talked about post-game expectancy, and this was the first time their defense did not hold their opponent below their season average. So Iowa State did have some success against them. But no, I like BYU. I think that they're a solid foundation. They don't beat themselves. They're going to continue to grind out wins. Now, here's the deal. Their hardest games are still ahead of them in November. I think they're going to go lose at Texas Tech, a couple of toss-up games with TCU and Cincinnati. So I don't think this is going to hold up for them. Not that they're a fraud or anything, but it's just their hardest games are still coming. So I see them more like a 10-2 or a 9-3.
Well, and as you pointed out this week in your little extra addition there, part of Pick 6 Plus, looking at the preseason win totals, BYU's already clinched it. They're already over their win total. And a lot of people, when they heard the news that Jake Retzlaff was leaving the program, kind of raced to play under. I'm guilty of it. I took under 7.5 wins, and that's already a preseason loser. But yeah, BYU already exceeding those expectations, as is Virginia, as well as they've gone over their win total. Brett, let's get into the games this week, and a big one in the Big Ten, and I do have a win total over 7.5 for Nebraska. The Minnesota game was not ideal, and that might be the make or breaker, in my opinion, for Nebraska. You were very bullish on this USC team preseason, and now they're going on the road. They're about a 6-point favorite in Lincoln on Saturday night. What do you make of this one, Trojans and Nebraska?
Yeah, this one has a serious big-time feel there. It's going to be a blackout game in Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska. So it's going to be big time. So you were on Nebraska preseason. I liked it there. I was on USC. So this is pivotal for both. I think USC is in probably better shape for their win total. But you're talking about a playoff eliminator because both teams are sitting there with 2 losses. I know there's still a lot of games left, but you take a third loss, I think both of these would be eliminated. But here's the deal. Something's got to give here because, with Nebraska, they've really struggled against ranked programs, ranked teams over the last, handful of years, really dating back a decade. They've lost 27 straight against top 25 teams. Got to go all the way back to 2016, one of the longest streaks in the country. And not just are they losing, but against the spread, they struggle too. They're 1-9 against the spread against ranked teams dating back to 2022. So really, really struggled in that spot. And then with USC, I mean, you've documented this pretty well. When Lincoln Riley heads east out of LA, when he heads to the Central Time Zone or the Eastern Seaboard, they really struggle. It's like a different USC team. And then additionally, they're as the away favorite with USC, 3-11 against the spread since 2022. So something's got to give. You have USC traveling. You got Nebraska against a ranked team. I think USC is going to have the win here and the cover. 6.5 does seem fair. My numbers have it at 7. But after, sometimes you got to put the numbers aside. After watching these teams, I think Nebraska is a little bit skating by with some wins. It's been elite special teams, which is rare for them. But they played against some of the worst in the conference and have barely scraped by. You're talking Michigan State, Maryland. They got smoked by Minnesota. That was not even competitive. And then last week, again, a coin flip game with Northwestern. Meanwhile, like USC's margin's better. But if you want one specific spot that's going to determine the game, I'm looking at Nebraska's pass protection against USC's pass rush. USC's defense, they're really they gamble a lot. They're high risk, high reward. They're going to bring blitz packages. And the key is you have to hold your water long enough to hit on downfield shots. Nebraska's offensive line has really struggled. 127th in the country pass protection. Giving up a sack on 10% of attempts is terrible. So, and they're down their 2 tackles too. Look at keep an eye on the injury report. Their right tackle is out, and I think the backup is questionable. So it just does not look well for Nebraska. I'm going to go USC to win it and to cover.
Yeah, and the sweat will be on for Nebraska in that win total at UCLA, at Penn State, and apparently at the emerging superpower that is Iowa, as they are just destroying teams all of a sudden. So we'll be sweating it out, and I think Matt Newman's let me know that Nebraska, I think, has failed to go over their win total like 8 straight years. So could be the 9th straight year, and I'm sure folks in your backyard will not be thrilled if Matt Rule ends up being the guy for Penn State coming off of a 7-5 season, but still a lot of football to be played out. A game in the Big 12, and I think a lot of people, Brett, were surprised to see College Game Day pick Salt Lake City as their destination this week. But this is a big game, and Cincinnati is a team that has really kind of gone under the radar because of that week 1 loss in Nebraska and the fact that, let's be honest, they're in the Big 12. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Before we get into this game specifically, I would love you to dive into the numbers on Cincinnati, because this is a team that I just don't think is getting nearly enough credit for how prolific they have been offensively this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brennan Sorsby is one of the best kept secrets in college football. Unless you're really tuned into this Big 12, you wouldn't even know they exist. They get no national coverage. It's one of the best offenses in the country. They're top 10 in my numbers overall, 11th rushing, 12th passing. So really balanced run and pass. It's a fast tempo team. They're going to get their snaps in. And yeah, you look at the offensive line. This stands out to me. I have 2 metrics, my pass protection and my offensive line run push. They're number 1 nationally in both categories. I don't think I've ever seen that in my life, doing Pick 6 previews. So phenomenal offense. The defense gives up some yards and points. That is for sure. But this offense can outscore you. So that's what you have with Cincinnati. They're now sitting there 5-0 in the Big 12. I think my preseason expectations, I had them about 7th in the conference. They're about to, they already exceeded that. So when you look at my game grader, they're 30th nationally. But looking at that last 4 games, I like having the last 4 game metric. They're 15th. So they're really heating up. They're looking like a top 15 team right now as we speak. So maybe that's why game day gives them some attention. And they're going up against a fierce Utah defense. So I can't wait to see that strength on strength.
Yeah, I'm a big, if people know this program, granted, I live on the Pacific time zone, so I do have a little bit of an advantage when it comes to that. But we have a segment on the Tailgate Show called You Up. And the late night game and the late night slate last week was embarrassing. Only Utah, and that game was over in the first half. But Cincinnati, Utah, 10:15 Eastern. That should be a great one. Hawaii and San Jose State. Looking forward to that one, as I always look forward to seeing the Rainbow Warriors play. But let's dive into this matchup, Cincinnati and Utah. And you've got Utah being a pretty sizable favorite. I know Brett McMurphy, we actually opened the show alluding to the article that he wrote about the kind of shenanigans that was the injury report, as Devin Dampier was listed as probable. He did not play. Bird Ficklin was in. It didn't matter. But Utah's a pretty sizable favorite here. They're out to a 9-point favorite at circa. What do your numbers have for this game, and what are some of the matchups that you're looking forward to most in this showdown between Utah and Cincinnati?
Yeah, well, first off with the number there, 9 looks high. I've got it at 11.5 for Utah. I was kind of shocked to see it too. I think part of it is because we talked about Cincinnati's offense. Utah has almost as strong an offense, but then has an elite defense behind it too. So they're really both sides of the ball getting it done. Top 10 of my numbers on both sides. About the quarterback spot, Dampier has been perfect all year. I didn't even know he was banged up because of the injury report there, but it must remind Utah fans of the last couple seasons, the weekly is Cam Rising playing saga. I mean, they probably thought they were behind that, but that's continuing. But yeah, with Utah, I trust their coordinators a lot, especially Morgan Scalley. I think he's one of the best defensive minds in the country. Continues to get it done. Yeah, if you watch that Colorado game, it was one of the most unbalanced halves I've ever seen. 400 yards in one half for Utah, and they held Colorado under negative 18 yards. So the margins were insane. In this one, what I want to see, we talked about the strength on strength when Sorsby and Cincinnati have the ball against this Morgan Scalley defense. So I'm going to lean Utah here. The metrics, I love them there. I love their style of play. I love their home field advantage. That place gets loud. If you watch on TV, their camera's shaking on third down, on their third down jump. So I'm excited to see this one. I'll go Utah to win and to cover at home.
Yeah, your metrics pointed out, Cincinnati, great offense, but boy, that is a defense that can be had quite a bit. So we will see, and I know people will bring it up. Texas Tech, Utah, which was a disaster zone for Utah. That game was played at 10 a.m. local. Now this game will be played at night. Does that add a little bit more to the elements there for Utah in this particular spot? So, yeah, looking forward to that game, especially in that late night slate. I want to get your thoughts on Tennessee, because this is a team, and I was texting with a buddy the other day, and I was like, I don't know what to make of Tennessee so far this year, because, look, they're a team that only has two losses on the year, because they lost to Alabama most recently, but then they turn around and they crush Kentucky, still very much with an opportunity to make the college football playoff. And if they run the table at 10-2, they'll be thoroughly in the discussion, and we'll see the rankings unveiled in less than a week for the first college football playoff rankings. What do you make of this Tennessee team, and what are your metrics kind of pop out when it comes to the Vols this year?
Yeah, well, with Tennessee coming into the season, and I'm talking back in the winter, my questions were how would they replace their offensive line? How would they replace their receiver core? And then would they unlock some vertical passing? And little did I know the biggest drama was yet to come with the Nico deal coming in April. So their offense coming in had a ton of questions, and I give Josh Heupel a ton of credit because you look at them now, they're a top 5 offense in the country, number 1 fastest pace in the country. They're lighting everybody up. So they're going to get some yards and points in this one. It's going to be strength on strength again against Oklahoma's defense, similar to what we had with Kiffin and Ole Miss against Venables and Oklahoma last week. Ole Miss got the better edge of that one. We'll see if Oklahoma has some success against Tennessee. But what do I think of Tennessee? Well, their playoff starts now, actually, because I've got them in 3 toss-ups in November. You got to win all 3 to make the playoff if you're Tennessee. But this one I basically have as a pick 'em with Oklahoma. And then at Florida, I've got Tennessee by 2 points and Vanderbilt, Tennessee by 3 points. So, all 3 games within a field goal, they're going to have to go earn it if they want to get that playoff bid. So, in this one, we talk about when Tennessee's offense versus Oklahoma's defense, that's elite versus elite. The flip side is where I think this one's determined. When Oklahoma has the ball, I think John Mateer in this passing offense, they're going to get some explosives against a Tennessee pass defense towards the bottom of my metrics. In every category, completion percentage, QB rating, explosive passes allowed. So I think that's where you're going to see. It'll be a shootout. I think Oklahoma's going to outscore them, though, in this one Saturday.
All right. I know everyone wants to know about the holy war, Notre Dame and Boston College. I still get heartburn over Boston College. And I remember in 1993, I was in first grade. We took a family trip down to Disney World, and we were wearing our Notre Dame gear. This was the week after Notre Dame won the game of the century against Florida State, the eventual national champions. Don't ask Notre Dame fans about the 1993 national championship discussion. And Florida State loses to Notre Dame, then Notre Dame turns around and loses to Tom Coughlin and Boston College. I don't know what the point spread was. I think it was 3 touchdowns or something like that. Look, if you don't think that letdown spots are real, that was the ultimate letdown spot after beating Florida State. So this Boston College team always gives me heartburn, this program, I should say. But it has been relative easy goings for the Irish against Boston College. I was at the game at Fenway Park back in 2015, which was more of a challenging game then than the score. Well, I guess the point spread would indicate. Our colleague Stormy Bonatoni, or my colleague Stormy Bonatoni, she will be on the sidelines for this one. What are you looking forward to? We got your alma mater against, not my alma mater, my Subway alma mater, Notre Dame, and the Irish are 28.5-point favorites.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll say the vibes in the group chat, the alumni group chat, are really low right now. I mean, it's looking rough. Being blown out every week is no fun. But yeah, unfortunately, with this rivalry for me, I'm a 2015 grad of BC, which means I got on campus around in 2011. So I missed all the Matt Ryan years. I missed all those great battles you're talking about in the 90s and the early 2000s. All I've seen is losses to Notre Dame. So I don't see it flipping this time around. I think the game within the game is that point spread. Can BC get within 28.5? I mean, that's where we're at here. Can we compete within 4 touchdowns of Notre Dame? I don't think so. I think Notre Dame's going to flex. They have a little extra motivation, too, because they need those margins for their playoff resume. They want to blow everybody out, and I just don't see any fighting chance for BC. Struggling both sides of the ball, and then you got Notre Dame, number 3 in my formula. Number 1 the last 4 weeks, too. We talked about that, the heat check. They're number 1 in the country. So I'll go Notre Dame by more than 28.5. Might be 30, might be 40 plus in this one.
Well, Boston College did cover last weekend, so you had that going for the Screaming Eagles. But yeah, we will see. Notre Dame recently, actually under Marcus Freeman, still the best cover team in college football, even though, of course, they failed to cover the first 2 weeks. And the numbers have really come into play. The closing lines have come into play. Closed 10.5 against USC. They won by 10. I think Boise State closed 21.5. They won by 21. So the numbers have really come into play here this year. So we'll see if Notre Dame wins by 28, or if they do, as you said, flex a little bit. Before I let you run, Brett, any other game that jumps out to you just from intrigue, or you were surprised by how your numbers spit it out? What do you look at for week number 10?
Well, we talked about a lot of them. Florida, Georgia is interesting to me. Neutral site at Jacksonville, obviously. But, I thought it'd be a little more competitive with my numbers, but the numbers have Georgia by 12. I was shocked there. I think Vegas has it around a touchdown. I think Florida has some good roster talent. They're playing motivated ball with the interim. So we'll see about that. It's a rivalry game, both coming off the bye. I think you might have a little bit closer than what my numbers would say. So that's kind of a go against game grader kind of deal for me. Win total wise for the Pick 6 Plus subscribers, we got USC against Nebraska. TCU looking to clinch. I think they're on bye this week. Washington's looking pretty well. But what was I going to say? A big spot for Miami and SMU, because we were pro Miami going over 9.5 and also faded SMU. That was one of the teams I faded going under their 8.5. So, a Miami win could almost flip both of them in our direction. SMU would be a knockout punch. They would finish under right there, and Miami would continue to trend well. So, just some games within the games. I think Miami wins it convincingly, but if they can knock out SMU, that'd be nice for the Plus subscribers.
Yeah, we've seen the number drift up. The look ahead was 9.5, and it was funny because Wake Forest was my favorite bet last week, Brett. And there was part of me as that game was excruciatingly going on last week. I was hoping, you know what? How about a SMU win by 2, and then maybe we get a little cheaper number? But Wake Forest hits the field goal. They were the right side the whole way. They get the win. And I forgot that you had the under on SMU win total. So a very good field goal there.
I was sweating that one out. I'm glad somebody else watched it. I felt like I was the only guy in the country watching that game. But 17 punts. Wake Forest had 2 shots within the 5. They fumbled both times. But then the old ball doesn't lie deal where they get the walk-off. So that was a crazy game, buried amongst other big headliners. So, that was wild, and we'll see about this week. Wake Forest defense going against Florida State. Keep an eye on them. The Wake Forest defense is top 5 in my numbers. So, impressed there. But, we're a lot of action to cover here. It's November. No time for coaching carousel. We got a lot of games to kick off and cover on Saturday.
Yeah, that's the beauty of VSiN, baby. We only care about games and betting, and that's how we like to roll here. So, Brett, always appreciate it. I know you did a little free preview last week, so give the people the latest on the Pick 6 Plus latest and greatest.
Yeah, thanks. A weekly stats and information package there called Pick 6 Plus, all 68 Power 4 teams. You got my advanced stats, my projections for every game, talent profiles, situational splits and trends. Yeah, last week, week 9, I have up on the site for free. That was the free trial week. If you're interested in week 10 and beyond, just email me. I'll get you this edition, even though we're past Tuesday. It is a little bit discounted too now that we're about 2/3 of the season into the season. So give a check. Pick6previews.com. Pick 6 Plus. It's a mouthful.
Brett, always appreciate it. Follow him on Twitter at Pick6Previews. Brett joins us every Wednesday here on the podcast. That's going to do it for this episode. We'll be back on Thursday. Matt Humans and myself will be breaking down the full Week 10 card. So thanks to Brett, thanks to Wes Reynolds, thanks to Wyatt Tomchek and Ryan Hunter, the producers of this podcast. I'm Tim Murray. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast.